We have been witnessing rapid development in our world that indicates that the Sunday law is imminent. And we were told that this will come to many as an overwhelming surprise. Recently, on June 9th, doing Amazing Facts Ministries Bible Answers Live, a caller called with a question in regard to an imminent Sunday law, and some are saying that might happen within 3 months by the administration, by the Trump administration this year. Let me play for you the question that the caller asked Pastor Doug Batchelor and his team at Amazing Facts there.
All right, we'll go to, let's see, I think the next call that we have is Steve, listening in Canada. We have just a few minutes. Steve, welcome to the program.
Yes, good evening. I appreciate everything that you do in the name of God, and I'm watching it for years. I have one question. Thank you very much for your answers. Is the National Sunday Law, I heard, getting a bit scared, in about 3 months or less, this year is supposed to sign in the Trump government. Is there any truth in that?
Recently, I also had a similar question. Someone called me and the sister asked me almost the same question about the Sunday law. Should we expect a Sunday law this year? Let me tell you the answer that I gave to that particular sister there. My answer to her was, we do not have a definite time on when the Sunday law will be enacted, but the signs are all over us indicating that a Sunday law is imminent and it will happen soon. And I also said to the sister, the best thing for each one of us to do is to get ourselves ready, because based on what Jesus says in Matthew 24 and many other passages that we read from the Bible, the best thing that we can do is not to so much fixing or focusing our time on a particular date or even on event, but the best thing we could do is to get ready. And I believe also, this is part of my answer to the caller, I believe that God is holding back the winds of strife. He's holding this Sunday law movement for just a little bit longer. I believe that the stage is already set based on what we have been seeing happening with this climate change, with the calamities that are going on, wars and rumors of wars, the tensions that are going on in our world. I believe the stage is already set for a Sunday law, but God is holding it back so that His people can get ready, so that when it comes, when it hit us, it will not be as an overwhelming surprise for many of us. But again, before I go into the answer that Elder Doug Batchelor gave to the scholar, notice with me on the screen what Luke tells us here in chapter 21, verses 34 and 35. It says, "And take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting and drunkenness and cares of this life. And so that day," what day is that? The second coming of Jesus Christ. Again, "and so that day come upon you unawares." Let's pause. That day is referring to the second coming of Jesus Christ. But something must take place first, based on what the Bible tells us and spirit of prophecy, before we can experience the second coming of Jesus Christ. And what is that thing that must take place? That is the final test that spirit of prophecy described, and that is the National Sunday Law. That is the Sunday law that must take place first before the second coming of Jesus Christ. That will be the final apostasy for the United States of America. Back to the screen. Then he goes on to say, "For as a snare shall it come on all them that dwell on the face of the whole earth. What was the counsel Jesus gave? Be ye ready. That should have been part of the answer to the scholar that has a concern about an imminent or perhaps a Sunday law within 3 months of this year. But again, we'll get to the answer that Elder Batchelor gives us. But before we get to the answer, the question that I would like to ask, is there a movement for a Sunday law? Is a Sunday law brewing? What did the Pope give us for the solution to the problems that we are facing, quote unquote, climate change? It's the Sunday law. It's a national or a global Sunday law, or the global common good, as he calls it. We have been seeing unprecedented events taking place in the natural world, in the political world, and all of these things are telling us we need to get ready, and they are also pointing to a Sunday law that is coming upon God's people. Notice with me on the screen what this says here. From EcoWatch, Pope Francis declares climate emergency in meeting with big oil leaders. This was June 17, 2019. Another one here says, from The Guardian, June 14, 2019, Pope Francis declares climate emergency and urges action. Pope Francis has declared a global climate emergency, warning of the dangers of global heating and that a failure to act urgently to reduce greenhouse gases would be a brutal act of injustice toward the poor and future generations. Now keep in mind, once again, Laudato Si. Within this document that the Pope published in 2015, the solution, he says, to this climate problem, which he is calling for action, which he is declaring it's an emergency, the solution, once again, is Sunday. Next article here, it says, Pope Francis, the common good has become global. May 2nd, 2019, from the Catholic World Report. The common good, the Pope says, has become global, and nations must associate for their own benefit, Francis said. When a supranational common good is clearly identified, as in the case of, what is it again? Climate change or human trafficking, it necessitates a special legal authority capable of facilitating solutions. The Church observes with concern the re-emergence almost everywhere in the world of aggressive currents towards foreigners, especially immigrants, as well as that growing, notice carefully, nationalism that neglects the what again? The common good. Pope Francis told the professors gathered in Vatican City for the plenary. What is, once again, the common good? Well, within the Catholic writing, they tell us the common good is Sunday sacredness, is Sunday law. Again, Eddie Jones also tells us, defines the common good for us as the national Sunday law. Next article here, notice, from Caritas, which is a Catholic magazine from New Zealand. It says global common good, not national interest required on climate change. Let's pause. Notice carefully again, what is the common good? Is the Sunday law. They're calling for a global common good, an international Sunday law. That's the definition for what is being said here. Nationalism you should not be putting nationalism above the Sunday law. Notice carefully. It goes on to say, for the sake of the planet, the poor of today, and future generations, we need our political leaders to secure a robust global climate agreement in Paris. We call on them to exercise true courage, selflessness, and a genuine solidarity with humanity in order to achieve the long-term, what is it again? Common good. Back to The Pope encyclical on climate change, 237. There it is. The common good, the solution is Sunday sacredness. Now, in Revelation chapter 13, the Bible tells us in verse 11, "And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had two horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon." Then verse 12 says, "And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed." Now, this power that came up out of the earth is none other, as many of you know, in the United States of America, apostate Protestantism, who are reaching across the abyss in these last days as they are speaking as a dragon, to shake the hands of the papacy and to lead the world back to worship the first beast, which is Papal Rome. That is what the Bible tells us, that the role of the United States of America. Now, in 2015, then President Obama signed the Paris Agreement, climate change agreement, to have United States of America, along with the 184 countries, to take action on climate change. And keep in mind, this is a Sunday law describing or disguising, as Spirit of Prophecy tells us, the Sunday movement is making its way in darkness. Again, this is a Sunday law disguising as climate emergency. Now, when the Trump administration came in, sworn in, they said they will pull, keyword, pull the United States of America out of the climate change agreement. But the United States of America, according to many articles we've read in the past, cannot legally pull out of the agreement that then President Obama signed until after the election in 2020, the presidential election, which is on May or November 4th, 2020. That means the United States of America, despite of what Trump has been saying, the United States of America is still within the Paris Climate Change Agreement, still part of those nations that have agreed of whatever they signed back in 2015 in Paris. But notice carefully with me, it says here from The Guardian, this was back in May 2nd, 2019. House Democrats passed bill directing Trump to, keywords, stay in Paris climate deal. Democrats passed their first significant climate change legislation since gaining control of the House of Representatives this year, directing Donald Trump to, keyword again, remain in the landmark international agreement to limit the pollution that is hitting the world. Next article from the New York Times, also May 2nd, 2019, says, staking out battle lines, House votes to, again, keyword, keep US in Paris Climate Pact. Now those words there, keep, stay, remain, tells us that the United States of America is still part of the Paris Climate Change Agreement. Again, in spite of what the President, Donald Trump, has been saying. This is unlike what Elder Friendly said last year. He said that the United States of America is no longer part of the Paris Climate Change Agreement, so therefore don't worry about a national Sunday law coming soon. Now, in the answer that Elder Doug Batchelor gave to that individual who asked this question about an imminent or perhaps within 3 months we'll have a Sunday law, the answer that that brother received was very similar to what Elder Finley said. But notice, before we go there, go back to the screen again. It says here from the Seattle Times, June 12, 2019, time for what? For U.S. Senate to take on climate change. Bills now before the U.S. Senate provide distinct opportunities. As a first step, the Senate needs to stand up to President Donald Trump. The president's spectacularly wrong-headed decision to withdraw America from the Paris Climate Agreement must be reversed. Senate Bill 1743 and the House passed H.R. 9 would each stop this withdrawal and call for a federal plan for meeting the Paris Accords carbon reduction standards, which 185 nations have ratified. So here is the breakdown. We just read that the House, which is controlled by the Democrats, just passed back in May. They passed a climate change bill. Now, this bill was sent to and is now in the Senate, where they're supposed to vote on it. Now, keep in mind, the Senate is controlled by the Republicans. Now, if this bill were to pass the Senate, the President, Donald Trump, would have 3 months to sign it. Now, these are steps to the Sunday law. This is a Sunday law bill, again, disguising under climate change. Carefully, please, think with me for a moment. There is an election coming up, and we are in the midst of the campaign. Now, keep in mind what Spirit of Prophecy tells us. The legislators will yield to the popular demand for a law enforcing Sunday sacredness. And what's the bottom topic? What's the main topic this year? As in every election season, there's always a topic that dominates the headline. It's climate change. It is the big topics today. And even recently, President Trump started to back away from his stance on climate change. Before, he said climate change was a hoax. Now he's saying climate change does exist. Where are we heading? Now, again, let's go back to the question that the caller asked Elder Batchelor, and we'll also listen to the answer that he gave.
All right, we'll go to, let's see, I think the next call that we have is Steve, listening in Canada. We have just a few minutes. Steve, welcome to the program.
Yes, good evening. I appreciate everything that you do in the name of God, and I'm watching it for years. I have one question. Thank you very much for your answers. Is the National Sunday Law, I heard, getting a bit scared, in about 3 months or less, this year they're supposed to sign in the Trump government. Is there any truth in that?
All right, let me just explain for our listeners that many believe that in prophecy, that in the same way different governments have made laws that would force Christians to break one of God's law, like in Daniel chapter 3, they had to worship the image, or Daniel chapter 6, they could only pray to the king. In the last days, that there's going to be a law regarding the fourth commandment that will force people to worship a certain way. I've heard rumors. I've not seen anything. Karen and I were in the White House and got a religious liberty briefing last November. There's nothing on the horizon that I've heard of where they're making a Sunday law that's coming out of the current administration. I would not worry about that, Steve. I think it may come someday, but I don't see it on the horizon imminently. Matter of fact, it's more happening in Europe right now. I've seen things in Poland and some of the other countries, Bulgaria. All right, listening friends, we want to thank you so much for calling in.
You've heard the answer that Elder Batchelor gave. Why would Elder Batchelor give that answer? Isn't there an emergency? Based on what we just covered so far, isn't there an emergency? But before I answer the question, why would Elder Batchelor give that answer? Let's read what it says here on the screen from Signs of the Times, November 21st, 1906. Transgression has almost reached its limit. Confusion fills the world, and a great terror is soon to come upon human beings. The end is very near. God's people should do what? Should be preparing, keyword, for what is soon to break upon the world as an overwhelming surprise. What should have been the answer to this caller from Elder Bachelor, the answer should have been, we should be preparing, though we don't have an exact date when the Sunday law will be legislated, when this nation will legislate, will bring about this Sunday law. We should get ready. Why did Elder Bachelor give these vague answers? Not just vague answers, but they were very serious answers. He says last November, him and his wife and others were at the White House and got a briefing on religious liberty. And based on what was said, based on what he saw, based on what he heard, he did not hear anything coming from the Trump administration about an upcoming Sunday law. You think they would tell you something like this? You think they would say, hey, by the way, Doug, we are planning on legislating a national Sunday law next year, 2019. Why would he say this, brothers and sisters? To me, this is troubling. Notice what Sister White says here on the screen. It says here, from SDA Bible Commentary, page 975, there is a satanic force propelling the what? The Sunday movement. But it is, what's the word? Concealed. Even the men who are engaged in the work are themselves blinded to the results which will follow their movement. So two things here. The Sunday movement is concealed. It's making its way in darkness. You think they will tell you that they are about to legislate a Sunday law? Second thing is, she says, many within the Sunday movement do not know, do not understand where this is going to take, the result. And to go to the White House and to get a quote-unquote briefing on religious liberty, don't worry, you'll have your liberty. This is the same thing that Paul says. When they say peace and safety, what happened? Then sudden destruction comes upon them. The second thing he said that was really troubling for me, let's play it one more time.
All right, we'll go to, let's see, I think the next call that we have is Steve, listening in Canada. We have just a few minutes. Steve, welcome to the program.
Yes, good evening. I appreciate everything that you do in the name of God, and I'm watching you for years. I have one question. Thank you very much for your answers. Is the National Sunday Law, I heard, getting a bit scared, in about 3 months or less, this year is supposed to sign in the Trump government. Is there any truth in that?
All right, let me just explain for our listeners that many believe that in prophecy, that in the same way different governments have made laws that would force Christians to break one of God's law, like in Daniel chapter 3, they had to worship the image, or Daniel chapter 6, they could only pray to the king. In the last days, that there's going to be a law regarding the fourth commandment that will force people to worship a certain way. I've heard rumors. I've not seen anything. Karen and I were in the White House and got a religious liberty briefing last November. There's nothing on the horizon that I've heard of where they're making a Sunday law that's coming out of the current administration. I would not worry about that, Steve. I think it may come someday, but I don't see it on the horizon imminently. I would not worry about that, Steve. I think it may come someday, but I don't see it on the horizon imminently.
He says it may come Sunday. The it there is the National Sunday Law. But the word may come also indicate that, don't worry, it's not going to happen in your lifetime. It might not happen. It might not even happen. Let's play this one more time so that we can get it very clearly. Again, the expression, it may come Sunday. Does the Bible say a national Sunday law will come? The Spirit of Prophecy tells us a national Sunday law will come. This is not may come. Does the Bible says that Jesus is coming again? It does not say Christ may come one day. If it says Christ may come one day, then brothers and sisters, we are in big trouble. That means if he might not come, he might change his mind. But the Bible tells me it is impossible for God to lie. That we have this hope now that burns into our heart. What's the hope? Hope in the coming of the Lord. And Jesus again told us that he will come again. What did we read at the beginning of this message? He says in Luke 21, 34 and 35, and take heed to yourselves, lest at any time your hearts be overcharged with surfeiting and drunkenness and what else? And cares of this life. And so that day come upon you unawares. What day is that again? That is the second coming. That means Jesus says he will come again for sure. This is not something we should be questioning or thinking might happen or maybe someday. Then he goes on to say, for as a snare shall it come on all them that dwell on the face of the whole earth. The second coming will happen. But what must take place again before the second coming? It's a national Sunday law. It's not may happen, may come someday. It will come, because God cannot lie, brothers and sisters. This is what the Bible tells us. Now, the other thing that came to my mind as I read this from Elder, or listening to Elder Batchelor saying to the scholar that it might come or may come one day. This is what comes to mind. Recently, last year, Amazing Facts team, along with Elder Batchelor, put out videos and asking for donations, because they were building this mega center. Amazing Facts mega center. Well, why would you be in a hurry when you just build a multi-million-dollar buildings, property? Why would you be in a hurry to go to heaven? You want to enjoy that first, right? Notice, brothers and sisters, back to the screen. It says here, we as a people have not accomplished the work which God has committed to us. We are not what? Ready for the issue to which the enforcement of the Sunday law will bring us. It is, notice carefully, it is our duty as we see the signs of approaching peril. What must we do? To arouse to action. Let none sit in calm expectation of the evil, comforting themselves with the belief that this work must go on because prophecy has foretold it, and that the Lord will shelter his people. We are not doing the will of God if we sit in quietude, doing nothing to preserve liberty of conscience. Get ready. We need at this time to not sit in quietude and tell people that, well, it may come someday. What does that do for someone? For that brother who was very concerned, as you heard from the audio, was very concerned about an imminent Sunday law, perhaps this year. And he and perhaps his friends, he wanted to help his friends and relatives to be ready for this event. And then for you to tell them it may come someday. What is that? Don't worry. Keep supporting us. Go back to sleep. When it will come, when it's coming, we will let you know. Does that sound like there's no national Sunday law in the pipeline? Does that sound like there's no Sunday law within the Paris Climate Change Agreement that Elder Friendly tells us here? It's the same thing, but the Bible tells us something different. Spirit of prophecy tells us something different. Notice back to the screen. It says here from Matthew 24, verses 42 through 44. Watch therefore, for ye know not what hour your Lord doth come. But notice that if the good man of the house had known in what watch the thief would come, he would have watched, and would not have suffered his house to be broken up. Therefore, be ye also ready, for in such an hour as ye think not, the Son of Man cometh. So what's the counsel? Be ye therefore ready. For when this national Sunday law comes, you will be ready. And if you are ready for the national Sunday law, you will also be ready for the return of our loving Savior, Jesus Christ. Let's pray. Loving Father, which art in heaven, help us, Father, to take heed lest we fall, each one of us. Help us to study your word for ourselves and not to rely on men's understanding. We know based on the signs of the time that you are coming soon. This is even at the door. And help your people to be ready, and to help others as well to be ready until you come again. In Jesus' name, amen.